Live from New Delhi, you're watching Dear India Live, India's voice to the world. I am Tanvi Taneja, coming up in the next 30 minutes. French President Emmanuel Macron meets UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer at 10 Downing Street, a vow to tackle illegal migration across the English Channel. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio says no intention of abandoning ASEAN partnerships. Emphasize Indo-Pacific remains a focal point of US foreign policy. US President Donald Trump slaps 50% US tariffs on Brazilian imports starting in August, links tariffs to witch hunt against former President Jair Bolsonaro. Our first news from Europe. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer met French President Emmanuel Macron at 10 Downing Street for a summit focused on deepening defence and nuclear cooperation. For the first time, the UK and France will coordinate their independent nuclear deterrence in response to extreme threats to Europe. UK and France are also working to reach a deal on undocumented migrants crossing the English Channel.
For us, it's about delivering the changes that the British people want to see. We all agree the situation in the Channel cannot go on as it is. So we're bringing new tactics into play and a new level of intent to tackle illegal migration and break the business model of the criminal gangs.
I am pleased that this summit will firstly cement progress in terms of strategic thinking and joint action, but also enable us to move forward in terms of capabilities, including on more sensitive issues such as nuclear deterrence. Important work has been completed and we will return to this later.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen survived a no-confidence vote in the European Parliament on Thursday. The motion failed to get two-thirds majority it needed to pass, with 360 parliamentarians voting against the motion, while only 175 supporting it. The vote was initiated by far-right lawmakers who accused von der Leyen of undermining trust in the EU through unlawful actions. It was the first time since 2014 that a Commission President has faced such a motion. The then President, Jean-Claude Juncker, also survived the vote. On to Asia now. India's Minister of State for External Affairs, Pabitra Margarita, co-chaired a productive ASEAN-India Foreign Ministers meeting in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, with Secretary of Foreign Affairs of the Philippines, Teresa P. Lazaro. The leaders adopted a new ASEAN-India Plan of Action for the years starting 2026 till 2030, aimed at expanding cooperation and strengthening comprehensive strategic partnership. ASEAN-India celebrate the Year of Tourism this year. Discussions focused on ways and means to further enhance people-to-people ties. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio signed a bilateral MOU on civil nuclear cooperation with his Malaysian counterpart on Thursday. Speaking during the signing ceremony in Kuala Lumpur, Rubio said that the MOU is an example of how it can be done at a time when several countries have expressed an interest in civil nuclear programs. The so-called 123 agreements establish a legally binding framework for significant peaceful nuclear cooperation between the United States and its partners.
There are many countries in the world, some are in the headlines lately, who have expressed an interest in civil nuclear programs. And this is an example of how it can be done. And we're very grateful to be able to do it with such a close partner. Obviously, much work remains. We're anxious to move forward on the negotiations on the 123 agreement. And this is the next step forward in a country whose future is incredibly bright.
The US-Malaysia nuclear cooperation MOU was signed at a time when tensions remain high between the US and Iran on nuclear issues following last month's US strikes on Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Further, amid rising concerns over protectionist policies, the United States has sought to reassure Southeast Asian nations of its enduring commitment to the region. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio told ASEAN leaders on Thursday that the Indo-Pacific remains a focal point of US foreign policy, stressing Washington's intention to strengthen and build upon its partnerships with the bloc. Rubio's remarks come even as President Donald Trump's administration moves ahead with hefty tariffs and duties ranging from 25% to 40% on several ASEAN countries. The tariffs have fueled unease across the region, with many questioning whether Trump's America First agenda will undercut deeper diplomatic and economic engagement with Southeast Asia.
The Indo-Pacific, the region, remains a focal point of U.S. foreign policy. When I hear in the news that perhaps the United States or the world might be distracted by events in other parts of the planet, I would say distraction is impossible, because it is our view, our strong view, and the reality that this century and the story of the next 50 years will largely be written here, in this region, in this part of the world.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov and US Secretary of State Marco Rubio met in Malaysia on the sidelines of the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting. Their meeting comes at a time when US President Donald Trump said that he was disappointed with Russian President Vladimir Putin as the conflict in Ukraine drags on. Earlier, Rubio and Lavrov joined ASEAN foreign ministers at a meeting that included Australia, China, the European Union, Japan, South Korea and others.
But it was a frank conversation. It was an important one. We had it, and we talked about some other items as well and related to the war in Ukraine, but that was obviously the first and foremost topic that we discussed. And look, the president's been pretty clear. He's disappointed and frustrated that there's not been more flexibility on the Russian side to bring about an end to this conflict. And we hope that can change.
Further, Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov commended Myanmar for coordinating a dialogue with ASEAN as part of efforts to promote a strategic partnership.
Respected colleagues, it is a pleasure to work with you here in Kuala Lumpur. First of all, I would like to thank Malaysia for its hospitality and perfect organization of this event. And I would like to acknowledge gratitude of Myanmar as a coordinator of the Russia-ASEAN dialogue for its efforts to promote our strategic partnership.
Russia's Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov also met China's Wang Yi on the sidelines of ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur. The two sides praised the development of political dialogue and practical cooperation amid increased turbulence in global relations. Moscow and Beijing both oppose plans to militarize the Asia-Pacific region, including attempts to place military infrastructure similar to the one NATO has. Lavrov also held talks with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio at the summit. On to Europe now. Rome is hosting a two-day conference on the reconstruction and recovery of Ukraine. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni welcomed leaders at the conference, which is aimed at mobilizing international support for Ukraine. European Commission has announced $2.7 billion in support to Ukraine. The funds include loan guarantees and additional grants from international and bilateral public financial institutions. The conference has pledged over $11.7 billion for the economic recovery of Ukraine.
The message we want to send entrepreneurs today is simple. Do not be afraid to invest, to build, to rebuild in Ukraine. Because investing in Ukraine's reconstruction is not a gamble. It's an investment in a nation that has shown more resilience than any other. But it is also an investment in peace, in the economic growth of all Europe and in the security of our citizens.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has welcomed the launch of a European fund aimed at mobilizing private investment for the reconstruction of Ukraine at a high-level conference in Rome on Thursday.
Economic growth requires freedom for the private sector to flourish. This is particularly important in the case of Ukraine because the enormous cost of reconstruction cannot be financed through public funds alone. This is why you, Volodymyr, and I, when we met in Berlin a few weeks ago, met German companies which are active in Ukraine. What I can report back from that meeting is the enormous interest of private businesses in participating in Ukraine's reconstruction.
Next updates on the Gaza truce talks. Leaders are inching towards a Gaza ceasefire deal as talks are going in a good direction between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and US President Donald Trump in the United States. Speaking in an interview with Fox Business Network's Mornings with Maria, Netanyahu said negotiations are focused on a 60-day ceasefire that would see half of the living and deceased hostages returned to Israel. He said Israel had set up its own system to prevent Hamas from diverting supplies.
And you have been meeting with President Trump about a potential ceasefire with Hamas. Where does that stand? Will you agree to some of these new recent demands of Hamas?
Well, look, we are talking about a 60-day ceasefire in which half the live hostages and half of the deceased hostages would be returned to Israel by these Hamas monsters, you know. And yes, I think we're getting closer to a deal. I think.
While Hamas on Wednesday said it would release 10 hostages as part of the Gaza ceasefire talks, after Israel struck an upbeat note about the prospects for a deal to stop the fighting in Gaza. The group's statement came after 4 days of indirect talks brokered by Qatar, and as the United States signaled its belief that agreement for a 60-day truce would be struck before the end of the week. Of the 251 hostages seized during the assault on Israeli border communities near Gaza, 49 are still held in the territory, including 27 the Israeli military says are dead. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump is also quite optimistic that there is a very good chance of a ceasefire in Gaza this week or the next, after meeting Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Tuesday for the second time in 2 days to discuss the situation.
Well, we're talking about Gaza for the most part. I think we have a chance this week or next week. Not definitely. There's nothing definite about war and Gaza and all of the other places that we all deal with so much. But there's a very good chance that we'll have a settlement, an agreement of some kind this week and maybe next week if not.
You're watching DD India Live, still to come on the show. Armenia and Azerbaijan leaders meet for peace talks in the UAE. No big breakthrough so far. We also take a look at Central Asia's green housing boom as rice husks replace cement in buildings at the Batken region of Kyrgyzstan. And Serbian tennis icon Novak Djokovic will battle it out against Yannick Sinner in the semi-finals of Wimbledon on Friday.
Om Trayambagam Gejamage Sugantim Prushtivattanam Uruvar Urumiga Bandanat Murtriyor Mushya Mamardar Maha Ganesha Potri Har Har Mahadeva. I'm from Malaysia. I'm very happy we have reached this stage after, all the challenges that we went through. Finally, I'm here. So I am very, very blessed even to be here. But once I complete the journey, it will be very, very good.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I am Tanvi Taneja. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev met in the United Arab Emirates on Thursday. The meeting was to finalize a peace agreement after nearly 4 decades of conflict. The two leaders' first formal encounter since they agreed on the draft text of the peace agreement. Peace talks began after Azerbaijan recaptured Karabakh in September 2023, prompting almost all of the territory's 100,000 Armenians to flee to Armenia. In a potential stumbling block to a deal, Azerbaijan has said that it wants Armenia to change its constitution, which it says makes implicit claims to its territory. And India is expanding its business footprint across the globe. In Shangzhou, China's bustling auto hub, Novelis, a company under the Aditya Birla Group, stands as a testament to the power of India's growth story. A visit to the facility highlighted how Indian firms are not just participating but leading on the world stage, driving innovation in technology, manufacturing, R&D. Interactions with local officials and industry leaders further underscored the impact of Indian enterprises. Following Prime Minister Narendra Modi's recent visit to Cyprus, marking the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister in over 2 decades, DD India's Jessica Taneja spoke with the High Commissioner of Cyprus to India about the outcomes and evolving dynamics of the relationship between India and Cyprus.
We have with us the High Commissioner of Cyprus. Thank you for speaking to DD India and taking our time for us. Prime Minister Narendra Modi was in Cyprus just a few weeks ago, an important visit, especially when it comes to India-Cyprus relationship, and also a lot that Cyprus has to offer, both as an EU member state as well as other important initiatives that the EU collectively works towards, particularly IMEC as well. Tell us about what did you make of this visit? How do you see the relationship moving forward now?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. As you know, Cyprus and India go back a long time regarding our bilateral relationship. Our President Makarios and your Prime Minister Nehru were the 2 co-founders of the non-aligned movement. Of course, after 2004, when we joined the European Union, we can no longer call ourselves non-aligned, but the strong bilateral sentiments prevail to this day. His Excellency stopped in Cyprus for 2 days. He had very important bilateral meetings with our side, with our president. There was a very powerful joint declaration issued. You can find it at the website of the Ministry of External Affairs. Basically, we continue our collaboration and we enhance it in several areas. Trade, of course, commerce, education, tourism, defense, and so many more.
You talk about defense as well as the India-Middle East economic European corridor. That's an important component of the relationship and part of the discussions this time around between the 2 leaders as well. Where are the 2 countries on IMEC project?
The famous IMEC, as you know, was announced in the G20 summit here in India. And even though Cyprus is not one of the original signatories like France and Italy, it is a member of the IMEC under the EU umbrella because the EU is a signatory. Now, as you know from your geography, Cyprus is the easternmost Mediterranean nation. Geographically speaking, somebody would have to reach Cyprus first and then it would be the gateway into Europe. So we're very happy to be able to contribute, to participate in this great endeavor that for the next 10 years I think will occupy not only regional commerce but the global commerce. We can offer excellent facilitation services through our ports, logistical support. There are already some Indian shipping companies established in Cyprus, IT personnel, the list goes on and on. So we're very happy and very excited about this prospect.
And next, a story on Central Asia's green housing boom. In the quiet village of Kizilkia, southern Kyrgyzstan, a building revolution is sprouting made from rice. Yes, you heard that right. Today, we take you to the eco-friendly revolution of Kyrgyzstan, where innovation is driving homes to be built from rice husks instead of the usual component, cement. Take a look.
Akhmatbek Uremov's house in Kyrgyzstan may look ordinary, but its walls, composed of eco-bricks, crafted from rice husks, clay and chemical-free glue. This sustainable alternative is catching on fast in a country battling climate change and water scarcity. Spearheaded by 27-year-old innovator Nursultan Tabaldev, who's built 300 homes so far, rice-based bricks over insulation, affordability and environmental relief. Thanks to silica in the husks, they match cement in strength but cut down on carbon emissions. People are all praised for the rice walls for keeping homes warm in winter and cool in spring. Farmers also look equally thrilled. Nursultan's method recycles the 40% waste left over after harvest, once burned and discarded. The Batken region produces a third of Kyrgyzstan's rice crop, making the material abundant and accessible. With dreams to expand to neighboring Kazakhstan using reeds and straw, this grassroots innovation is quietly reshaping how Central Asia thinks about housing, waste, and climate resilience. It's not just construction but movement built from the ground up, one rice husk at a time. Shobit Chandola for DD India.
Another story of sustainability. Mexican fishermen are joining a unique fight to save an extraordinary amphibian. They are helping researchers to save an endangered salamander from extinction in Mexico's Lake Pátzcuaro. The achoke is known for its gills resembling a lion's mane and for its ability to regenerate body parts.
On the tranquil waters of Mexico's Lake Pátzcuaro, Fraulein Cora has spent his whole life as a fisherman. But now, his nets carry something far more precious than fish. He and his fellow fishermen are fighting to save one of the lake's most extraordinary creatures, the achoke, a salamander with a lion-like mane and a magical ability to regenerate. Achoke, which is a rare species of amphibians, was once plentiful. Over years, this friendly-faced amphibian has been pushed to the brink of extinction by overfishing and pollution. Now, with the help from experts, locals are giving the achoke a second chance. Eggs are carefully collected and hatched in labs before the young salamanders are moved to a protected reserve, tended by fishermen until they are ready to return to the lake. For Mexico's indigenous communities, this small friendly-faced amphibian has been more than just food. It's a centuries-old remedy for respiratory illness. Now, the community is giving back, protecting a creature that has become a living link between their past and future. On the fragile surface of Lake Pátzcuaro, the fight for survival continues. Tripti Tripaঠি's report for DD India.
The spread of artificial intelligence is virtually taking over every sector, and now that includes hospitality as well. In Dubai, your dinner might soon come out with a side of source code. Woohoo, a restaurant that bills itself as dining in the future, is set to open in September in central Dubai, a stone's throw from the world's tallest structure, the Burj Khalifa. Food at Woohoo will be assembled by humans for now, but everything else from the menu to ambience to service will be designed by a culinary large language model called Chef Ayman. One of Woohoo's founders said that Ayman, a portmanteau of artificial intelligence and trained on decades of food science research, molecular composition data and more than 1,000 recipes from cooking traditions around the world, that's an AI chef for you. And on to sports news now. Serbian tennis icon Novak Djokovic has advanced to the semi-finals of the Wimbledon. Novak Djokovic took one step closer to a record-leveling 8th Wimbledon win as he battled past Flavio Cobolli. 2 more victories and Djokovic will be able to secure his record-extending 25th Grand Slam title. Djokovic's next challenger is world number 1 Jannik Sinner, who defeated Ben Shelton in the quarterfinals. Sinner has a slight upper hand over Djokovic. He leads Djokovic 5-4 in head-to-head. Sinner's latest win over Djokovic came in the French Open semi-finals last month. India has been officially confirmed as the host nation for the major international shooting competitions for the next 3 consecutive years. India will host the ISSF World Cup in 2027, ISSF Junior World Championship in 2028 and conduct the first ever edition of the Shooting League of India in November this year. This further cements India's standing as a trusted and capable global destination for the sports of shooting. And on to football now. Paris Saint-Germain is set to face Chelsea in the FIFA Club World Cup final on Sunday after claiming a commanding victory over Real Madrid in the semi-finals. Champions League winners PSG thrashed Real Madrid 4-0 to enter the finals of the tournament. Fabian Ruiz scored twice, while Dembele and Ramos scored 1 each to propel PSG to victory. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, Chelsea beat Fluminense 2-0 in New Jersey to reach the final of the Club World Cup. And that's all for this edition of DD India Live. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on our different social media handles at DD India Live. And you can also download our DD India mobile app for quick news and updates on the go. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from all of us here in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.